All right, guys, welcome back to the channel. And in today's video, I want to share a personal story that shows the miracle of compound interest. Now, for those of you who follow personal finance, have read different books on investing, specifically in the stock market, you'll certainly come across compound interest. There'll be different graphs and charts that people lay out. A lot of times in the books, they'll show two people, one who invested, let's say, from the age of 20 to 30, never invested again. Someone else, let's say, who invested from the age of 40 to 50 and did double the amount of capital, but ends up with less capital because the power of time, the power of compounding over time. That's just one particular example that you'll see. You'll come across different quotations on it. But let's get into this particular story, this personal story related to compound interest. So, and I'll keep it anonymous, and so for privacy and such. But basically, this particular person, young person, had his bar mitzvah and received approximately $17,000. And both he and his parents were asking me, well, what do you think I should do with it? What's your thought? And I kind of gave them the advice that Jack Bogle would give them, that Warren Buffett would give them, that Malkiel and many other investment types, which is buy a vanilla index fund, buy VOO. He's so young. At this point, you can just set it in there, forget it. Don't even open the account for many, many years. In fact, Bogle has a line: "Don't peak." You know, for people, let's say if they're doing it for retirement until they actually hit retirement, because sometimes in investing you are your own worst enemy. And to that point, he initially invested it, and the panic of 2020 and COVID, he had called and his parents had called and were considering selling it and going to cash, and then trying to get back in when things calmed down. And I said, I quoted Jack Bogle, don't do something, just stand there. Just reinvest your dividends. This too shall pass, essentially. And it did. And so they held on, and they changed, account, or changed mailing addresses or something. And then they didn't access the account for a few years, and they just recently accessed it. And lo and behold, that initial balance of 17,000 is now 38,000. So it essentially doubled in 4 years, which is phenomenal. And they called and were very thankful and grateful. And furthermore, I think for this individual who's just about to go to college, he really now sees the power of compound interest. As someone who's young, ambitious, he's very much interested in Gary Vaynerchuk and selling and business, and a Shopify store, an Amazon reseller, and sort of the entrepreneurship thing. And that's fine. That's fine. But I think a lot of people miss out on the power of investing. And I think this particular example with his bar mitzvah money, he's really able to see. And then I'm going to pull up the compound interest calculator for you, and something I did for him as well, to show that if he really does nothing else in his life regarding investing, and just allows compounding to unfold, he'll end up in a very, very good place. So let's go ahead and shift over here. And so here we go. So I put in about $38,000, 20 years, 10%. And this would be $255,000. I believe he's 17 years old. So he'd be 37. Let's go out another, or let's actually do this. Let's do if he does 500 a month. So $6,000, 633,000. If, let's say, he has a part-time job, or let's say he does some of this Amazon reseller, Gary Vaynerchuk garage sales, baseball cards, Shopify stores and starts to develop an income from these things, or even just gets a generic job, um, and starts putting $500 a month in right now. In 20 years, he'd have approximately 633,000, um, which is at 37 years old. Phenomenal. And let's go back to zero. But let's go now 30 years. So I am 42 presently, as you're seeing me on the screen here. So he would be about 5 years older than me, still a fairly young man, full-fledged adult. So we're going to go calculate. So 663,000, 30 years with no additions. Let's now come and let's do the power of dollar cost averaging. So let's look at 6,000, 633. Wow. So this is really powerful here. $38,000, 500 a month, which would be 6,000. 30 years, so he'd be 5 years older than me. It'd be 47, and 10%, 1.7. Now, let's do it if he actually used this for retirement. So let's say he said, let's say he starts an amazing Shopify store, and that's his business as an adult, or he goes to law school, whatever he ends up doing, and he basically allows this to compound. He just sticks to the 500 a month, and he says this is going to be my retirement. So let's say he does 40 years, which he'd be 57. So let's do it 42, kind of 59. Sometimes people say either 59 or 69 would be retirement age. He'd have $5.6 million if he started today doing 500 a month. He did it for the rest of his life, and he used this particular bar mitzvah account that started with $17,000. He'd have 5.6 million going into retirement, which is amazing. One little caveat, and I said it to him, and I say it to others. And I kind of got this from my friend Logan Kane, who wrote an article about this, is the problem with this is a lot of people don't understand the power of compound interest. And I think he does now, so I don't think this necessarily would apply to him. But sometimes when, people get an inheritance or they get bar mitzvah money, and they see this go from 17,000 to 38,000, and they've never really had money heretofore. They take that 38,000 and they use it for college, or they buy a car with it, or they use it for graduate school. I believe it's Charlie Munger who said something to the effect of, never interrupt compounding needlessly. So really, in a situation like this, I wouldn't use this for college. I wouldn't use this for a car. I wouldn't use this as a down payment on a house. I would pretend he actually doesn't have it, and it's not in his possession at all, other than obviously the 500 a month. So that's kind of the power of that. And then I wanted to shift over here, and again, you can just search compound interest quotations. There's a famous Einstein quotation. This is one here. I found this is on YouTube. I'm just going to play a minute of it. It just has some different quotations. Here we go.
15 best quotes for compounding and compound interest. The compound effect is the principle of reaping huge rewards from a series of small, smart choices. Darren Hardy. When it comes to compounding, don't trust your intuition. You have no idea how powerful it is. Manoj Arora. A modest rate of return can accumulate a fortune over time. You don't need to beat the market, do over-leveraging, or pick the best stock to be rich. You just need to earn a decent rate of return, and let your money compound over time. Naved Abdali. There will be good years, and there will be bad years, but the compounding will continue on unabated. Pietros Maneos. Compound interest is the eighth wonder of the world. He who understands it, earns it. He who doesn't, pays it. Albert Einstein. Time is your friend, impulse is your enemy. Take advantage of compound interest, and don't be captivated by the siren song of the market.
All right. Well, so they actually included my quotation there. Very nice to be placed before Albert Einstein and Warren Buffett. But yeah, I mean, my quotation there will be good years, there will be bad years, but the compounding will continue on unabated. And it's just the idea, and it's sort of like in 2020 when they had called me and they were concerned of maybe going to cash, is just let compounding take its place, especially because of his age. I mean, now if this were someone, let's say 55, and they were about to use that money for retirement, maybe there's a different situation there. But someone who's in their teens, definitely shouldn't think about going to cash and trying to play trader versus investor. And actually, Bogle has a wonderful book just on the different mentalities, the clash of cultures, trading culture versus investing culture. Great read. And so back to Vanguard. Actually, this is Jack Brennan. I believe he was the CEO of Vanguard after Bogle. And I'm reading his book now, Straight Talk on Investing, Lessons for a Lifetime, Jack Brennan, former CEO. And I wanted to read two passages from his book that also kind of relate to compounding, that are nice little anecdotes. I nearly finished his book. I'll probably finish it today, actually, after this video. So let's see here. This is on page 45 of his book here. He says, I soon had a great revelation. One day, an older acquaintance who had a sizable account at Vanguard called to ask for help with the transaction. He wanted to move money from his daughter's account to the bank so she could buy a home. When I looked up her account, I was dumbfounded to see that this individual, who was my age, under 30, had a six-figure balance. When I commented on it, her father explained matter-of-factly that he'd been investing $50 a month on her behalf in one of Vanguard's stock funds ever since she was born. It was amazing to see how a modest amount of money, invested with discipline and in an effective vehicle, could grow to such a large sum in less than 30 years. It was a powerful, tangible manifestation of the rewards of disciplined saving and the power of investing in the financial markets. I regularly relay this anecdote to young people who are just beginning their careers or starting families in hopes that it will inspire them as it did me. So great example there. And it's funny, another relative, they just had a child, and I said, one of the best things you can do for this child is open a Vanguard account, an M1 account, TD Ameritrade, whatever, and contribute a little bit a month to this, because it's a baby. So you do it for 20 years or 30 years, that's an investing lifetime for other people. And you can see this particular example really exemplifies that thought. And the second one here is on page 179, and it's the beginning of the chapter, Buy and Hold Really Works. Quote, I was attending a Vanguard client conference in Pittsburgh one night in 1997 when a gentleman introduced himself and shared a terrific story. Back in 1958, when the man was in his teens, he had earned $1,200 and had asked his father what he should do with the money. The father and son consulted a financial advisor who recommended that they invest in a new mutual fund called the Wellington Equity Fund. For those of you who don't know, Wellington Equity Fund, I believe, is a Vanguard mutual fund, stock and bond balanced. There, the money sat untouched for the next 39 years, growing and accumulating reinvested distributions at an average rate of 13% a year. By 1997, this man's account in Vanguard Windsor Fund, as it is known today, so there he goes, it's a Vanguard fund, had grown to $145,000, more than 100 times his original investment. He just wanted to say thanks. I returned that gratitude, telling him he's just provided one more real example of why getting in the investing game early and being patient can have tremendous results. If you're determined to succeed at investing, make it your first priority to become a buy and hold investor. As the anecdote about the investor from Pittsburgh demonstrates, picking sound investments and keeping them for the long term really works. Not only will this simple strategy put you on the path to accumulating wealth, it will enable you to live your life without devoting a lot of time and energy to managing your investments. So there you go. So obviously from the real life example from family, and then the particular two there from Jack Brennan, and some the quotations, one including mine. You can see the real power of compound interest. And we'll just kind of end here. You'll see if you just really want to be kind of blown away, let's just keep playing, just for a minute or two before I end the video. You can really like kind of what I use the term kind of geek out with the compound interest calculator. So, let's say his Shopify business does great. He's able to do 1,000 a month. At 5.6 million becomes 9.1 million. Let's say you bring it out 8 more years, 50 years, 19 million. Let's say you bring it back to 42 years, which would be at 59.5. But let's say his return is 14% instead of 10. This guy's was 13. Let's actually go 13 then, because that was the Windsor Fund, I believe. 24 million. So you do 1,000 a month on this 38,000 for 42 years, which means you'd be 59, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, 59 at 13%, 24 million. And let's see, and again, you can really see the power of compound interest here. You just take 1 percentage point away. The difference in 1 percentage point over 42 years, 24 million, is 17.3 to 24. So it's about $7 million, literally, is just 1 percentage point. And then if you go from 13 to 14, so if you went down to 12 and then you go to 14, you go up 1 too, you're at 33. You go from 24 million to 33, which is it's about what, 9 million difference there. So like a little percentage point over the long term really adds up. Again, you could just play around with this on your own investments, and for those watching, obviously I run about 1.2 million in the Maneos compounding machine. So let's just kind of 42. Let's say, so 52, 62, 72. Let's go 30 years, be 72. Let's just do a conservative. Let's say I'm going to do 1,000 a month, 23 million. You do it up a little bit here, 39 million. You do it here. And here's another sort of truism. Oh, not 144%, 14%, 66 million. Here's another truism also, just as a final thought before I end this video. And I always say it is the 1% of investors compound in that 20 to 30% range. You can pull up the Maneos compounding machine. I believe I'm at 21%. Will I be able to keep that up? I don't know. It's unlikely based on the math. But let's just say, for argument's sake, that I do keep up that 21% CAGR for the next 30 years. $386 million. So you can see that when you're in that, Warren Buffett, I believe Berkshire's at 22, people like Icon and Tepper, 29%. So when you're in that 20% over the long term, even if you start with a small amount of money and you outperform the market, it's just mind-boggling what you end up with. So anyways, guys, that's it for today. Hopefully that personal bar mitzvah investment story gave you some new insights. Any comments, questions, feel free to reach out. Take care. Ciao.